Bill Colliver in for Johnny Mac. Johnny Mac here with you, and we are joined by the esteemed colleague from the Philadelphia Inquirer, lead columnist Mike Sielski joins us on Birds 365. You hear him Saturdays with our buddy. I say our because we kind of share him. We got joint custody of Glenn Mack now. Mike Sielski and Jody McDonald here with you. All right, Mike. How dare you ask Jalen Hurts about his injury status? You can't do that. What were you thinking, young man?
You know, Jody, there are times where I wish these press conferences were not put on websites and television because it just changes.
And WIP radio.
And WIP radio.
You gotta be honest here.
Because it changes the dynamic of the interaction between the people who are there and the athlete. And it adds a level of performativeness to it that I don't like. Look, I was asking that question because the quarterback has a bruise on his knee. It is obvious when he plays that it is at least affecting him somewhat.
Sure.
And it has to be asked. I'm not doing it to draw attention to myself. I'm not doing it to annoy Jalen Hurts, and clearly it annoys him, and that's par for the course. I'm not trying to be Jalen Hurts' buddy. He's got enough friends. I've got enough friends. I'm covering him. I'm not trying to do anything else other than that. But somebody has to ask the question because it is a significant aspect to this team now and in the future. Suppose he gets hurt worse. Suppose it leads to him taking a hit that he otherwise wouldn't take. You have to ask these questions, and I don't understand. I really don't understand the people within the media who kind of are on the side of the athlete in this situation, who are like, yeah, Jalen, you don't like a question, walk away. Like, do you want to know what's going on with these teams or not? Like, I'm really kind of baffled by this whole thing. I don't understand why it's such a big deal that I asked this question.
Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't a tough. It wasn't a tough question. I mean, you're not getting into anything that you shouldn't have asked. We all see it. We've all seen him limping on the field, especially in that game. I forget what play it was. It was on a. Was it on the one where Devontae Smith had the questionable catch where they had to rush up to the line? You could kind of see him struggling to get up there. So, but yeah, you got to ask the question, Mike. But staying along on the injury side. What are we hearing about Cam Jurgens? I'm reading a lot and reading between the lines here that Tyler Steen may be getting his first start. Is that how you're thinking it's going to?
It's looking like he's getting reps at practice here. And yeah, look, you know, Steen played a little bit against Washington. I think the Eagles feel pretty good about him. This is the benefit, I guess you'd say, of having such depth along the offensive line is that if Cam is not fully at 100%, then they feel comfortable going with Tyler Steen. So, I mean, look, the line hasn't suffered too much for Cam Jurgens not being in there. And I don't think that's an indictment of Cam Jurgens. I think it's a testament to the priority that the Eagles place along the offensive line, the coaching ability of Jeff Stoutland, his ability to get these guys ready. So, look, if Steen plays there, I think the Eagles will feel pretty good. If Cam Jurgens ends up playing there Sunday, I think they'll feel a little better.
They haven't made that official, by the way. It's just that he got first team reps in practice. So now we're all trying to extrapolate and see what's going to go down on Sunday. If Steen steps in and plays well, that's just better for the Eagles going forward. Maybe more so down the road than 2023, but they need to win here in 2023. Mike, it's almost incomprehensible, but I think there's actually an underrated aspect to the game this week. That if the Eagles win, they're up 2.5 games. They got a 2-game lead, plus they got a half game because they've got the advantage over the Cowboys. But if they lose, they're within their bye week of being in second place because the Cowboys will be a half game behind because they've never had their bye. But if they win next week while the Eagles are downtime in it, the Cowboys are actually going to be on first place. Between a gaping lead and being in second place, that's a huge difference. Are we underselling how big this game is in week 9 of an NFL 17-game season?
Yes, we are. I don't feel like there's a true sense of urgency. And as you said, Jody, kind of the implications of the outcome of this game. You're right. The gap between the Eagles winning this game and the Eagles losing it potentially is very, very wide. And not to mention the fact that if the Cowboys win, the Cowboys then become a story in a huge way nationally, right? It seems to me that a lot of the discussion of the Eagles outside of the Philadelphia region has kind of been of like, yeah, they're 7-1, but they haven't looked great. And I've felt kind of the same way, that, you know, they weren't great against the Patriots, they weren't great against the Vikings. They won some games without being at their best. And if they lose to the Cowboys, then all of a sudden the Eagles become, well, you know, they're good. They're probably going to make the playoffs, but they're not as good as they were last year. And now we have a chance to talk about the Cowboys as a legitimate contender in the NFC. So just from a narrative standpoint, there's a lot at stake for the Eagles. And as you said, tangibly, Jody, the difference between winning and losing this game for them is huge.
And not only what it does in the NFC East, but overall, you look at the Detroit Lions, they got an easier schedule, a lot easier schedule the rest of the way. So it'd be nice to get another game up on them as well, but we'll see how all that plays out. But you mentioned, back to the Cam Jurgens thing, that you didn't think that the offensive line has taken a huge hit since he went out. So what's your theory on, I have a theory for this, but I want to hear yours on what's happened to the run game over the last 5 weeks. Because if you look at the average yards per carry, since Jurgens went out in that Washington game, the running backs are only averaging 3.2 yards per carry in the last 5 games, which would put them in the bottom of the NFL. So we all love to talk about how good of a running offense this team has, how much of a luxury it is that they can lean on their running game when the passing game's not working. But we haven't seen that over the last 5 weeks. What's your theory on what's going on with that running game?
I think my theory is that they've played some teams in the Jets and certainly Washington with the defensive line it had before Josh Harris started to go full Sam Hinkie on them, that can stop the run. And the Eagles aren't going to dominate everybody. They're just not. And is the offensive line as good this season as it was last season? No, I don't think it is on the whole. I think Isaac Seumalo was an underrated player, was terrific at guard. And, you know, last year this line was better than it has been. I think some of that is a little bit of wear and tear and age on Lane Johnson. Lane Johnson is still great. He's terrific. Not quite as good as he was last season. Those sorts of things happen both in the run game and in the pass game. But, you know, look, the good part about the Eagles, if you're a fan, is they cannot run the ball or struggle to run the ball. And then you can have Jalen Hurts have one of his best games throwing the ball of his career against Washington. I mean, he made one mistake in the whole game. It was a big mistake, the fumble at the goal line and the tush push. But otherwise, he was really good. And that's who they want to be. They want to be able to be whatever they have to be to win a game.
I'll give you a half an answer too, Bill. I know you asked Mike, but Jalen Hurts last 2 weeks, averaging less than 2 yards per carry. That's going to bring the number down. When you're only doing the tush push and you're not making plays with your legs and you're protecting a bum knee that you don't want to talk about, yeah, that's going to bring that running number down.
Yeah, and to that point, Jody, part of the reason that the Eagles could run the ball with their running backs, because Bill's point was about the running back yard per carry average being down.
Was it running back or just running in general, Bill?
Overall running back. If you look at the last 5 weeks, overall it's 3.4 yards a carry. Just the running backs are 3.2. But
my point is, when you have Hurts back there who might tuck it into a running back's belly or pull it back and take it himself, that freezes a defense so that if he does give the ball to Kenny Gainwell or DeAndre Swift, that's a natural advantage for those running backs because the defense has to guard against the threat of him running. Jalen hasn't been running as effectively as he was last season, so I'm sure that has a factor in there too.
Residual effect, agreed.
Yeah.
All right, be careful with your answer here, and I want you to be honest with me because I trust you, Mike Sielski. You're an honest journalist. Who gets more yards this week, A.J. Brown or C.D. Lamb?
Ooh, that's a good question. I might be willing to guess C.D. Lamb there, only because it's reached the point with A.J. where I think teams have to start doing something to take him away. It's so easy for him to do what he's doing, or it looks so easy for him to do what he's been doing over the last 6 weeks, that I might be inclined to think the Cowboys are just going to say, you know what, we're going to take A.J. Brown away and take our chances with Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert. Whereas that Eagles secondary looks pick apartable. Let's put it that way, Joey. And so betting man, I might say, CD has the better chance for a bigger game.
Agreed, because no matter what the Eagles do, are you going to double out of the slot? Really? You're going to have a safety cover with the slot corner against CeeDee Lamb? That's taking an awful big chance. Now, I don't think they could burn on the outside. I don't think either Slay or Bradbury played well last week, but I have faith they'll play better this week. But that'd be a lot of resources to put to a guy in the slot. So I'm leaning to it. That makes me a hater, so be it. But
you're such a hater.
I know I am. But the only thing that matters is keeping the main thing. The main thing is Jalen likes to say the final score, and I'm certainly going to lean toward the Eagles scoring more points than the Cowboys do. All right, Mike, on the defensive side of the ball, we debated this earlier in the week. I think it's worth revisiting. I thought the Eagles' defensive line played poorly last week. Not as poorly as their defensive backs, but poorly just the same. Give Sam Howell credit, give Eric Bieniemy credit. Their whole game plan of getting out of Sam's hands fast was very good, but they still didn't get home. You probably heard me talk about, because you jumped in early, they didn't bat any balls down either. Defensive line didn't really do anything last week. We fair? Am I being overly critical of the defensive line, that you can take a defensive line out if you just want to line up and throw it in 1.4 seconds every single snap? Or do you agree with me that they had a little bit of a down game last week across the board?
Well, I mean, look, Howell was getting the ball out so quickly, and the receivers were so open when he did that. I don't know how much of that you put on the defensive line and how much you put on it on the underneath coverage and the coverage in the secondary. I didn't feel like the defensive line had a lot of time to get there. Now, you can make an argument that Sean Desai should adjust. You can make an argument that they should get there anyway. But I never felt like Sam Howell was standing back there for 4.5 seconds.
No.
And the defensive line just couldn't get near him. I felt like Sam Howell was hitting the top of his drop and getting rid of the ball immediately. And Washington receivers had 6 inches to a foot of space around them to make catches. So I'm not sure. Like, in that situation, Jody, I would say I would put it more on the 7 guys behind the defensive line than I would the defensive line.
Yeah, and I know we keep talking about the Dallas Cowboys offense and CeeDee Lamb, but if you go back and look at their 7 games this season, they're not winning games on offense. They're winning games on defense. They're putting up a lot of points from the defensive side of the ball. Their defense has been really good this season. But if you look at the 2 teams that have been able to beat them, the Arizona Cardinals and the San Francisco 49ers, Cardinals are number 4 in the NFL in rushing. The Niners are number 5 in the NFL in rushing. In those 2 games, they averaged 196 rushing yards. In the 5 games that the Cowboys have won, all those teams are in the bottom of the NFL, bottom half of the NFL in running the football. So it seems like it's right in front of us that the game plan this week should be run the football. We say it a lot for Brian Johnson, run the football. Do you think the Eagles will commit to the run against the defense like the Dallas Cowboys?
I mean, I think it's always a dicey question, Bill, when you ask, will the Eagles commit to the run? Because we know from evidence that they don't want to commit to the run. That's not how they're built. That's not how Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman, and to a degree Nick Sirianni, want to coach an offensive game plan. They want to throw the ball. If I were the Eagles, I would ask Jalen Hurts, or tell Jalen Hurts, or talk with Jalen Hurts about having him carry the ball once or twice early in the game. Establish that we are willing to do this early in a game. Because I think you're right. I think the Cowboys can be run on. It's a question of, after the last few weeks and some lack of success against teams that are pretty good against stopping the run, will the Eagles want to do it? So, yeah, the blueprint is there. The question is whether they're going to – it's the same question we ask about the Eagles every week. Are they going to stay with it and allow it to work for them? I don't know, because they want to throw the ball. That's just how they are.
And even though you're right, Bill, you're making good statistical arguments, and we've been talking all show about how analytics run football now. Analytics run every sport. Not sure that this one is going to outweigh the fact that the Eagles love their passing game. All right, along those lines, Mike Sielski, the game within the game. And I think there's another underrated aspect that we should probably talk more about. Offensive coordinator versus defensive coordinator. Offensive coordinator versus defensive coordinator. Mike McCarthy versus Sean Desai. Brian Johnson versus Dan Quinn. You good with the matchups this week? Eagles get the better of the offensive quarter against the defensive quarter matchups this week between these two teams?
I mean, I think Sean Desai, generally speaking, has been pretty good as the Eagles defensive coordinator. I've never thought of Mike McCarthy as like a revolutionary thinker when it comes to offense. So, I'd say the Eagles have a push there, maybe if not a slight advantage. As far as Brian Johnson against Dan Quinn, I'll give it to the Cowboys there. I think Dan Quinn probably has the edge on Brian Johnson just based on experience and understanding what the Eagles want to do and how they can do it. Although having said that, it's not like the Cowboys stopped the Eagles very much in their 2 games last season. The Eagles put up, 35, 37 points with Gardner Minshew.
With Gardner.
Yeah, and, raced out to a 20-point lead in the game at the Link earlier in the season before kind of taking their foot off the gas. So, look, I think Brian Johnson is still kind of finding his way as a play caller. I don't think he has the natural kind of understanding of offensive rhythm and timing in terms of play calling that Shane Steichen had. But, as long as he doesn't hand the ball to Kenny Gainwell on 3rd and 8 again, I think most people, will be okay with the matchup and feeling like the Eagles have it. All right, would I give Dan Quinn the advantage? Yeah, I probably would, but that doesn't mean Brian Johnson can't get him once in a while.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll continue to see Brian Johnson grow as a play caller. I think he has gotten better. Clearly, the red zone has still been a little bit of an issue, but the red zone's gotten better over the last 2 weeks outside of those 2 turnovers. But I want to do something that Nick Sirianni would be mad at, and that is let's look ahead for a second. So we've gotten to that point of the schedule where when it came out in the offseason, all of us looked at that schedule and we're like, damn, those are a tough 6-game stretch. This is what I've been referring to as the gauntlet for the Philadelphia Eagles. So when you look at these next 6 games, we talked about how important this game is for the standings. What does Mike Sielski think the Eagles need to do in the next 6 games to really put themselves in position to hopefully get that number 1 seed in the NFC?
I mean, I think at most you can lose 2 of them, and that's, you're talking about going to Kansas City. You're talking about having Buffalo and Josh Allen come here. You're talking about seeing the Cowboys again, this time in Dallas. You're talking about San Francisco, which all of a sudden doesn't look as imposing as it once did. So, look, I think I would be mildly surprised if the Eagles won in Kansas City just because of the circumstances. And I think they could afford to lose 1 more of those games coming up before, you really have to panic. I've said since the beginning, Bill, of the season that the Eagles might end up with a worse record this season than they did last season and be every bit as good, if not better, than they were last season just because of the nature of the schedule. And I think that could bear out, over the next 6 weeks.
I could tell you if the Eagles are going to win in Kansas City with one key piece of information. What's Taylor Swift's itinerary? Because they don't lose when she shows up at games. So we got to find out if she's going to be there for that Eagle game that week.
I'm just trying to shake off that wisecrack, Joey.
Shake it off. Very good. All right, Mike. Will there be a letdown in the stands this week? Because the birds on the field will not be in Kelly Green. Is that going to take an edge off the crowd this week?
No, I didn't. I thought it was cool that the Eagles went back to the Kelly Green against the Dolphins, and they'll do it again against the Bills. But I didn't perceive like a real big difference between the crowd enthusiasm inside or outside of Kelly Green. It's Eagles Cowboys. That place will be on fire. It always is.
See, I thought Jody was referring to, when he says the letdown, that Micah Parsons told the Cowboys fans he wanted them to take over Lincoln Financial Field. You kidding me?
That was just dumb.
Are you kidding me?
That was not a wise thing for Micah to say. Just because, not because it's going to fire Eagles fans up more. It's just because the idea of Cowboys fans taking over Lincoln Financial Field is kind of silly.
Yeah, not happening.
No. Eagles fans are the ones that do the takeover on traveling, not the other way around. Not the other way around. So are we ready for Mike's prediction yet, Jody, or we got a little bit more time with Mike?
Yeah, Mike, we can get you on the record here. The Eagles are a 3-point favorite, which into itself does surprise me because Vegas is really good at this. There's reason why everybody's got an app now and they're taking it every single state and they just keep adding because they're good at what they do, setting these lines and bouncing out and taking their percentage. I thought the Eagles would be favored by more than a field goal because I think they're a better team. And if you believe that home field advantage moves the line or should move the line by 3 points, they're trying to tell you that this is a toss-up game at a neutral site. I don't believe that. I think the Eagles are a better football team. Will they win? Will they cover? Will they win by more than 3 points on Sunday?
Yeah, I think they will. I think they'll win. I think they'll cover. I think they'll struggle a little bit in the red zone. They'll be able to move the ball against the Cowboys defense, but they'll settle for some Jake Elliott field goals. But in the end, they're going to win the game 33-24.
33-24 from Mr. Sielski. And do me a favor. Don't ask Joan about his knee after the game. Unless they have to carry him off, then it is a legitimate question, Mr. Sielski. If he needs to be aided off the field, if John Deere's got to come out onto the field, then you absolutely can ask the question. But other than that, let someone make.
I will ask the questions that I want to ask, Jody.
Make John McMullen do it. Yeah,
all right.
You did the heavy lifting this week.
I'll slip John a $5 and he can ask about the knee.
Make Johnny Mac do some heavy lifting. Mike, always a pleasure, buddy. Thank you very much for coming on. We'll get you back in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, guys.
Mike Sielski here with us on Birds 365. All right, so we got the Damo prediction of 31-27, the McMullen prediction of 31-23, the Sielski prediction of 33-24. I've got mine, and we'll get Billy C's prediction on the Eagles game against. And shockingly, the Eagles have been the selection of all three people so far. We very rarely have someone pick the other side. I did against the Dolphins, foolishly. That was my bad. But we'll come back. Billy C and I will give you the last couple thoughts on the matchup between the Eagles and the Cowboys coming up Sunday at Lincoln Financial Field here on Birds 365.